Well, good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you may be checking in from in the world. Thank you for joining us to learn about the University of Medicine and Health Sciences, or UMHS. My name is Sean Powers. I'm Vice President for Admissions at UMHS, and my colleagues and I appreciate the opportunity to share some information about the university with you. I'd like to begin by noting that if you've not yet applied for admission to UMHS, applications are currently being accepted and processed for the three entry terms in the year 2026. The winter term starts in January, the spring term starts in May, and the fall term starts next September. So if your plan was to already have started medical school, but you've not yet been given the opportunity to do so, talk to us. We may still be able to provide that opportunity for you. And I want to note too that if you're ready right now, if you were planning on being in school a month ago and it didn't work out, well, you can apply for this January. And in just 2.5 months' time, you could be experiencing what you've been working toward for so long, and that's day one of medical school. And now we run these monthly webinars to present the UMHS program in detail, and we always have great questions from our audience. So as we move along this evening, feel free to type your questions into the Q&A area where we will answer them individually while asking our panelists for their perspective on a few as well. And helping out behind the scenes with that, as also, in handling many of those answers, is my colleague, Sham Daria. Sham is Director of Enrollment Management at UMHS. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our panelists for this evening. First, it's our Assistant Dean of Student Affairs, who's also Associate Professor of Molecular Science and also Chair of the Research Program. He wears a number of hats, Dr. Craig Eyre. Good evening, Craig. Good to see you.
Good evening. Thanks, Sean, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm glad you could come out. I'm happy to chat with you about life at UMHS, what our curriculum looks like, how you progress through the basic sciences and into your clinical world. So I'm Canadian. My background is in immunology and genetics. So I've been with the university now for I just started my 7th year, so I'm really glad you could join us this evening, and thanks very much. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
All righty. Thanks, Craig. Also with us, joining us from the campus in St. Kitts, is our Director of Learning Services, Dr. Donna Walker. Good evening, Dr. Walker. Good to see you as well.
Good evening, Sean, and welcome everyone to this session. It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Dr. Walker. I've been supporting medical education for over a decade in the Caribbean context. And as the Director of Learning Services here, I oversee a lot of the support that's available to you. As a medical education learning specialist, I support students in a range of ways, from one-on-one appointments, workshops, and in our dedicated study skills class.
And thanks so much for sharing some of your time with the audience this evening, Dr. Walker. Good to see you. Now, we need a real live current UMHS student, of course, for you to hear from as well. And we certainly have one. She's in the midst of her 4th year, currently in a sub-I family medicine rotation in Jackson, Tennessee. And she's originally from Memphis. And that's Allison Ship. Good evening, Allison. Good to see you too.
Hi, good evening. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to join us today. I am Allison Ship. I am a 4th-year student here in my last and final rotation as a medical student. So,
Wow.
to me, I'm so excited. Also in the process of applying. So please keep me in your prayers, UMHS family. But I am more than excited to answer any questions that you may have about the student experience at UMHS. How do you study? How do you transition from undergrad or a master's program into a rigorous curriculum as a medical student? So more than happy to answer those questions for you. I understand where you are. I understand the gravity of you logging into this session. So thank you again. And it is my hope that this webinar proves beneficial for you.
And when you say applying, of course, you mean applying for residency.
For residency, absolutely.
The next step for any medical student, regardless of where you may end up in medical school, your next step is your postgraduate training or your residency. So we'll be interested to hear some of that experience from you as well. Thanks, Allison, for sharing some of your time too. But last but not least, to tie everything together and talk about how the education at UMHS leads to success in your career, we do have one of our favorite alumni. That's Dr. Holly Workus. Dr. Workus graduated in 2017 and is now double board certified in internal medicine and hospice and palliative care. She's on staff at Henry Ford St. John Hospital and also Elara Hospice up in Michigan as well. Good evening, Dr. Workis, and thanks so much for sharing some of your time too.
Thank you for having me. I just wanted to let everyone know that I am from Michigan and I was a non-traditional applicant. After college, I worked in a genetics lab for 2 years before applying for medical school. And thank you, Sean. I graduated in 2017. I did my internal medicine residency in Chicago and I did my palliative and hospice fellowship at Vanderbilt. And I've been in attending for 4 years, and I'm very grateful for everything the school has done for me because I wouldn't be where I was without UMHS. So I'm happy to be here to help answer questions.
And on behalf of the audience, I know certainly the audience will get a lot from you as well as all of our panelists this evening. So, those of you in our audience, you're surely aware that there are a few decent options out there when you're considering an international medical school. And our aim during this session is to provide an understanding of why we feel UMHS is worthy of that consideration in comparison. So, once again, I invite you to type your questions into the Q&A area as we go, since we want to know what is on your mind. Now, Dr. Workis, don't go too far because I'd like to start with you. You know, it's been a little over a decade since you began your well, I guess it's been more than a decade since you began your journey at UMHS. So when you think back, knowing that the audience are in the same position that you were, when you were looking around at medical schools, when you were weighing your options, what was it that attracted you to UMHS? And can you tell your story about your decision on where you were going to apply?
Sure. So I was not familiar with UMHS. I knew that there were options for Caribbean medical schools, but my college advisor talked to me about UMHS and she put me in contact with the school and I spoke with an alumni of the school. I definitely did my research. I think that's the biggest thing you can do for yourself is when you are looking in the Caribbean or even US schools, it's important to talk to an alumni to see what their experience was. I had never been to St. Kitts before, so my first experience going to St. Kitts was for orientation week, and I just felt very welcomed, even from meeting with my first contact with the UMHS administrative connection. It's just very welcoming. I really liked that it was a small class size. I went to a small liberal arts college and I felt like that was the perfect fit for me. And over 10 years later, I'm still in contact with my professors and obviously connected with the school because it is a family vibe. So that was very important to me.
And and you're the vice president of the Alumni Association now too. So
I
you've
am.
maintained that connection through the years. So now, so sticking with when you started, once you enrolled, can you give an overview of what the experience was like for you, both, just a little overview during basic sciences, and then obviously, talk about how you came back to the U.S. during, for clerkships.
Sure. So, you fly down for orientation weekend, and I was in the extended basic science program. I do think the school does a really good job, and I'm sure Sean is going to talk to you about these different programs, but putting you in a program that's the best fit for you because they really want you to have the class load that you can handle because you're really going to medical school not just to pass your boards, but to help people. Um, so going down there, I think it's like I said, a very family vibe. So you're meeting friends on the airplane who you're going to be lifelong friends with, who's starting medical school with you. I was really impressed right from the beginning of the campus and really how kind the professors were and how available they were to you. I know my parents' worry originally when I told them I was applying to the Caribbean was safety. There is you have to show your ID to get on campus, and I felt very safe. And the school itself is beautiful. The pictures honestly don't do it justice. Everything is top notch. You're only down there for either 4 semesters or 5 semesters, depending on what program you get accepted into, and it does go very fast. So I really, really loved my experience on St. Kitts. And then I'm from Michigan, so I wanted to do my third and fourth year in Michigan. So after you're on the island, you go to Maine for a semester, and then that's where you're studying for your boards. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump right into this, but and I'll let Sean talk about this progress because it's
Oh,
different for everyone.
That's all right. Go. We want to hear about you. What just sort
Okay.
of rough overview, your experience, how you move through, and the most important thing really is tying it together. Where you are now. You're double board certified, internal medicine, palliative care. So you've come a long way. That's probably a poor way to characterize it. You've done so much. You've accomplished so much. And we were there sort of in the middle, helping you do that. So yeah, so hearing about how you moved back into the US and you were able to go home to your home state for clinical rotations, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I had never, first of all, I had never gone to St. Kitts. So that was my first experience going down there for my first 2 years of medical school. Then we do a semester in Maine, and I had never been to Maine before. Now I'm 37, and those are two of my most favorite places in the world to be. Maine was absolutely beautiful. St. Kitts is absolutely amazing. So just that journey, I really feel like you don't realize it when you're starting this journey, but UMHS will take you to so many cool places, and you can choose to do rotations in different places as well. Um, but so after St. Kitts and then Maine, I did my rotations in Michigan, and for me it was a very easy journey. I feel like I adapted really well. I had the support from the school and my friends and the professors, so yeah, I thought it was really easy succession and journey.
So, excuse me, we're talking about coming back into the United States after having spent a short period of time outside of the US for the basic science program. So, and for you, I mean, again, you did your clinical rotations as all of our students do in North America. And then obviously you graduated, you moved on to your residency in the United States. It's probably natural to compare yourself to others who you were rotating with as a third or fourth year student. We can hear from Allison about this as well. But also, for you, those of you, the other people who were in your postgraduate training, your residency program, were coming from, other, schools in the area, coming from all over the country, probably. So, it's natural as a human being to compare yourself to them. You're coming from this school, they were coming from all these other schools. So, how did you feel? How well prepared did you feel compared to them, knowing that they were coming from, again, places all over the US and elsewhere?
Sure. I think there's two things I want to touch on. One, when I was applying to the Caribbean school, at first I was nervous that there was a stigma about going to a Caribbean medical school. And I will tell you, after you pass your United States medical licensing exam, Sean said exactly that. You are working with everyone else from everywhere around the world. So I didn't feel that. I was nervous about that stigma, but I have never experienced it being a practicing physician for 4 years. I do think it's very common to compare yourself to other people. What I was most impressed about is before you're in your rotations in your third and fourth year, wherever you choose to do them in the United States, or in other places, you do have hospital experience in St. Kitts your last semester. You're actually going in the hospital. You would be surprised how nervous you get the first time you go into a patient's room. You forget to wash your hands. You forget to introduce yourself. You forget to say, normal common greetings. And then you're nervous because you're being watched by a professor. So really, this is the simulation lab, which is on the top floor of one of the buildings in St. Kitts. So this is great because you have real patients that are paid actresses that you're practicing on. You have mannequins that you can run codes on. So you have that experience, but you're also going into the actual hospital and rounding on patients. And then when you're in Maine, you're going to be put with whatever you're interested in. Hopefully, the school can match you up with that doctor for shadowing. So by the time you're in your third and fourth year, wow, you've had so much experience already. I really felt like I was confident in my training. I was confident in my people skills, my patient physician interaction skills. I was very impressed with how prepared I was starting my third and fourth year.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Workus. And now I think, Allison, you're obviously in the midst of this, right now, and you're in your final rotation in your fourth year. So how similar or different has your experience been as a UMHS student? And can you maybe comment on why UMHS has proven to be the right place for you and, why, it might be the right place for those in our audience?
I think it's been a very similar experience. So, a little bit about how I got to UMHS. Prior to my master's program, I had never considered much about Caribbean schools, didn't really know much about them. The only thing that I knew was that students usually, for what I'd heard, is that students apply to Caribbean schools because they could not get into US schools. And that's very similar to the stigma that Dr. Work has talked about. And that's all that I knew. So as a part of my master's program, I actually had the benefit of having a professor that was a graduate from a Caribbean school. He attended AUA. And he decided that he would have one Caribbean school come each semester to speak to the students to broaden our horizons about possible programs to apply to for medical school. And I appreciated that much more than he could ever have imagined. So Earl Maynor was actually the one that came down as the representative to my master's program to do a presentation. And I fell in love with what he had to say about UMHS. I did my own research. I looked up the program, what the curriculum was, compared it to US schools, because I wanted to be sure that if I applied to this program and was accepted, that I knew that the education that I was receiving was compatible to US schools. And it definitely was. You can see here that starting first semester, you take gross anatomy and histology. All of these are foundational courses that are very valuable to receive your first semester of medical school. I also asked to speak to current students because I wanted to hear what a student's experience was like on the island, what they felt going through the program, and if they felt prepared coming out of clinical rotations, which is why I now offer my time to speak to students, because that experience was valuable for me. So as a student at UMHS, I started in the ARP program. As a part of my research, I knew that ARP was offered at UMHS and similar programs were offered at other schools, but I knew that I needed a stronger foundation before entering medical school. So ARP is our accelerated review program, and it is very true to its name. It is a course that is the length of one semester, but it has a targeted curriculum for you. So you experience each of the courses that you'll take as a medical student within this 14 or 15 week course. Now, what that means is that you have to digest this information rather quickly, but you do get a chance to test out of each of those subjects, which is beneficial because what I did was kept like little post-it notes like this, and I would jot down the things that I struggled with. So as I entered the EBS program, or for students that go into med program, when you go into your anatomy course as a med student, you know the information that you struggled with. So I would pay special attention to those lectures and make sure I was able to grab those extra nuggets of information that I did not receive in ARP or that I struggled with in ARP. So ARP is great because it has a two-tiered approach. It's academic and it's communication and skills. So academics, I talked about experiencing the curriculum as a medical student, but for your skills, you also learn networking. You're able to build your peer groups. You work in team projects. So that's really great for your medical school career because as a resident or even in your clinical years, you are a part of your patient's treatment team, which means you work on these interdisciplinary teams and you need to be able to work with other peers. One of the great things about ARP also is that the professors really care about you as a student and as a human being. And I think a lot of times we lose track of the human side of us as a student because we're so focused on passing boards, passing exams, excelling in our clinical rotations that we forget to take care of ourselves. So one of the things I learned in ARP is that you have to take a day for yourself, and it's okay to take a day. I learned what my personal love language for myself is, which is a pamper day. And so I still incorporate that once a week or twice a semester into my routine to make sure that I'm taking care of myself. And self-care is very important. So after I left the ARP program, I decided to go into the EBS program, which is our Extended Basic Sciences program, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the EBS program is the same courses that you'll take as a med student. The only difference is the amount of courses per semester. So for EBS, you'll be on island for 5 semesters. As a med student, you'll be there for 4 semesters. It's one less course a semester. And I chose that because I wanted to give myself a little bit more time to make sure I was able to grasp all of the concepts. If you've ever heard the expression that attending medical school is like drinking from a fire hydrant, that's kind of true. And so I wanted to make sure that I was able to slow down and grasp all of that information and build a strong foundation for myself because as Dr. Work has mentioned, you're only on the island for a small amount of time for your basic sciences. So you really want to make sure you are getting a strong foundation because your basic sciences or your didactic or your book work, however you choose to refer to it, is going to be your foundation for your clinical year. So you have to have that book knowledge first. And then moving into my clinical years, I am a Southern girl, so I wanted to do my rotations as much in the South as I could. And we actually have a hub in Georgia. And so I did the vast majority of my electives and my core rotations actually in Georgia. So between Atlanta and Augusta. And I did some traveling. I also was in Connecticut for surgery and Maryland for OB, but I chose to move around for those rotations because I wanted to experience different regions of the US. And that was just a personal preference to see if I like those areas, if it would be a place that I would consider for residency and for future training. But ultimately, I decided to come back to the South to pursue my elective rotations in Georgia and then now in Tennessee. As far as my performance and feeling prepared, I definitely think the course in Maine was very beneficial for my training outside of it being a mini ARP, is what I call it, because you actually review all of the important information in the high relevant clinical correlates from your basic sciences in Maine. And this was the time that I really felt that I started to think like a physician. I was able to start to put the pieces together to view the patient as a whole. So you would have these OSCEs or patient encounters where you would be presented with symptoms for your patient, and you would have to think about how a patient that's having chest pain, it could be cardiac issue, it could be a respiratory issue, it can even be a GI issue. So you started to put all of your organ systems together and really think in a clinical manner that's going to be beneficial for you in clinical rotation. So this was our introduction to clinical medicine 2 course, where you would do practice writing SOAPs, which are your notes for your patients. You would do your CPR training, all of the things to make you prepared. And so when I entered my clinical rotations as a 3rd and 4th year student, I definitely felt prepared as an IMG. Because of the stigma that we've all heard and some of us may have experienced, I think we grind harder, we work harder for what we have. And we want to make sure that we are putting our best foot forward always. And I would have preceptors comment and even compliment UMHS students on our preparedness, on our eagerness to be involved, our readiness to learn and to gain this knowledge and to be more hands-on. And that's because we were trained that way in Maine. We were trained that way in our final semester on island when we were able to rotate through the hospital. So UMHS definitely prepares you knowledge-based with your basic sciences, as well as your clinical skills to be prepared to go into the hospitals, into the clinics, to be hands-on with patients, to understand how to do a proper history taking when you go into a room and to put all the puzzle pieces together to be able to diagnose your patient.
That is a fantastic overview, Allison. Thank you so much. There's so much information to digest there. That was excellent. So thank you for that. Bit of a look back at your journey to where you are in 4th year. One of the things that you mentioned, was really true. One of the things that I jotted down was that one of the things you had heard earlier on about Caribbean schools. I mean, it's really a label. We're running a medical school and we're providing physicians to North America. No different than the schools where you grew up in Tennessee, or, the schools in Georgia, or the hospitals where you're working in Georgia, or, or anywhere else. And that's the thing. It's a label, international medical school graduate or Caribbean medical school. And it is true what you said. Many students who end up in an international medical school or a school like UMHS, it's because they did not get admitted to a US medical school, which is not a terrible thing. Because there are well over 50,000 people who apply to US medical schools every year, and there are only about 22, now 23,000 seats in those US medical schools. And the 30,000 or so people who aren't getting in, it doesn't mean they don't have what it takes to be successful physicians. It just means they weren't given an opportunity for whatever reason. By and large, they still have strong grades. They've done all of the prerequisite work, that everyone else has done. They've taken an MCAT. They've built up a tremendous resume, and likely everyone in our audience probably has done that or is on their way to doing that. And it's just the most competitive type of program that you can apply for. The interesting thing
Sean.
is that who's that?
Oh, sorry, that
You
was
lose
me.
me for a second? Did you lose me for a second?
No, no, actually, sorry. I thought you had paused for a second, and I was going to try to interject on something there that you had mentioned about the admissions.
I'm gonna, yeah, we'll I'll come right back to you, Craig. Those those 30,000 people that aren't getting in, they're much more similar to the people that do get in than they are different. And that's what I think you have to understand. And maybe some in our audience have already gone through that admissions process in the US and been told no, thank you. And it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It means that, you haven't found the right place to do it yet. And that's the thing, is that even though there's a very limited number of seats in US medical schools on the way in, there are more opportunities for residencies than there are graduates from US medical schools. And that's why a school like UMHS, certainly exists. But I do want to turn to Dr. Rare. Obviously, we've gotten a couple of good overviews from the students' perspective from both Holly and Allison. And I want to flip the script now and certainly hear from you, Craig, as a faculty member, and the success that they've experienced. I understand, why. It's because of the way the curriculum was designed. It's working the way it's supposed to, and that's why they're doing well. So I'm going to turn it over to you. You can jump off of a comment that I made, or you can talk a little bit about, the academic program from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry for that. It's always hard to time the pause when you're on Zoom. There's a little
and I
delay on
and I don't take a breath. So.
Yeah, I figure you've mastered the Kenny G circular breathing technique. But you mentioned something about the admissions for US medical schools, and the same thing is true in Canadian medical schools, where the number of applicants is dwarfing the number of seats that are available. And in fact, it's even more lopsided on the Canadian side. As I've traveled around to different schools, as you've mentioned, so I'm on the academic side, and I view admissions from a very different perspective. I think about the content that we're teaching, the curriculum, how that maps against other universities, how we approach medical education for how others approach medical education. But getting to speak the same language from admissions has been really eye-opening for me, because talking to other medical faculties, I've learned that admissions now has almost become a tactical game in a number of places, where they know full well the number of qualified applicants, not even just the total number of applicants, but the number of qualified applicants is way more than they're admitting. And they're actually banking on individuals who are willing to apply to the same schools over and over and over again, rather than go abroad or go somewhere else, because it keeps their numbers very high and it makes sure that they always have a pool that they can draw from, which sounds great for the school, absolutely terrible for the student. So, demonstrating to students that there are quality alternatives and that there are other ways that you can approach your medical education that's going to get you there has sort of become the mission that I've had for myself the last 3 years. And it's part of the reason why I enjoy doing this so much. So, I'll start by like our compare and contrast. So last year we had an opportunity to bring in 4 different visiting faculty members. one for our pathology course, one for neurology, and two in biochemistry. And we got the same comment from each of them. Now, these four faculty members have all taught in other medical schools. One was the dean of a medical school that was in North America. The same comment that we got from each of them was how rigorous the curriculum is here and how intense it is on its integration into those case-based and scenario-based learning right from the very beginning. And that's something that they didn't have the experience with in their other institutions, which in my mind, I think not only are we saying that we're a quality alternative, but I'm going to go out there and I'm going to say that there are places that you can go that will offer you an advantage over the traditional medical application route. And I think UMHS is one of them. So speaking as a faculty member, some of the hallmarks and some of the tent poles that are holding up that success are how we design our curriculum. So the start of the curriculum design with us is the role of the faculty member. In a medical school in North America, a faculty member in medicine might be expected to teach as little as 3 hours per week and maybe a maximum of about 20 hours in a semester. We have faculty members who'll put up 20 hours in a week in terms of teaching time. So the amount of time that you spend with each individual faculty member is an order of magnitude larger than you would in a North American medical school. That means that you build a rapport with faculty members. They learn how you approach your learning, and we can adjust in real time how we present our material, how we engage our classrooms, the kinds of examples we use, the kinds of scenarios that we provide, and where we need to adjust, where we can go faster, we can go slower, where we need more support. That doesn't happen in a curriculum design where the professor is just a content delivery device. And in many places, the person who's lecturing is not even the same person that meets with students or does small group activities. Whereas for us, it's all the same individuals. When you take learners and you disconnect them from their faculty in that way, it's sink or swim. And it basically becomes a scenario where if you don't get it, it's on your own responsibility to seek out those supports. It's your responsibility to change that. We flip the script where the faculty are at UMHS, they're designed, the curriculum is designed for us to be able to be proactive that way. We do that through a smaller student to faculty ratio. So we're about 7-to-1 for student to faculty ratio. We do that through team teaching with senior faculty members in each course so that we can each play to individual strengths. That makes sure that we can pivot the course as we need based on the content that we have and the learners that we have. We have an extensive peer tutoring network. We have an extensive and absolutely top-notch learner support team, which many other schools don't even employ at all. It's not even part of the medical curriculum. There might be a generic one that exists inside of the school. And then finally, all of our professors are professors, lecturers first. If we engage in research, it's essentially something that happens on our own time. And many of us do, but it de-emphasizes the priority that we are turning out papers and that we're publication machines rather than educators. So the entire experience at UMHS from the faculty perspective is upside down to what you would get in North America. And I think that's to the students' benefit rather than to designing a system that serves an anonymous institution. I think that's very much to our credit.
God, I didn't take myself off mute. There, so um, Holly and Allison both referenced the curricular structure. They gave the alphabet soup of EBS versus Med, and they gave a quick overview of it. Do you want to just add anything to talk about the academic structure? Just the
Yeah,
curriculum.
absolutely. So the acronyms that you're hearing tossed around, you may have heard ARP, EBS, MED. So these stand for different programs that we have for admissions. So ARP is our Accelerated Review Program. That is a really effective program for students who are non-traditional applicants or students who, maybe some part of their application is not as ideal as they wanted it to be. Hey, we were all there in undergrad. Listen, if you go back and you look at my first year undergrad, it's absolutely nothing that I'm proud of. In a lot of cases, that's going to rule you out of a medical school. They're going to use that as an absolute screen right there in the beginning. What we use the ARP program for is to offer a holistic approach to our admissions and to be able to say, I want to see your GPAs, I want to see your MCAT scores, I want to see your letters, I want to see your background, where you volunteered. I want to see you as an entire person, and I want you to meet with an interviewer. And if you're non-traditional, if there are areas where you are weaker, we can offer an admissions option through the ARP program that other schools can't offer you. So that is an absolutely enormous advantage and is an incredibly popular program for us. The other two acronyms that we've mentioned, EBS is short for Extended Basic Sciences, and MED is what we call the Basic Sciences program. They're identical programs in terms of the curriculum that you will be exposed to. What changes is their timing. So we know that learners assimilate information at different rates. Learners require different supports. Learners have different preferences in terms of their study habits. And so we actually maintain two totally separate timetables for our programs that students can enroll into. They differ by one semester, so 4 versus 5 semesters in St. Kitts. Um, the more popular of the two programs would be the Extended Basic Sciences, where we do this in 5 semesters, and that really allows a more approachable way to assimilate information, and it allows for learners to get more time for the integration. Because integration is where the USMLE exam is focused. So if our learners have more time for mastering that integration, they do better on the exam. And so these are all options that are available to students who are coming in to our program. One of the things that I'd like to say about the structure of the program is when you compare different medical schools, what you're going to see is two different philosophies to their curriculum. One is called a systems-based approach, and one is called a discipline-based approach. Systems are where the school kind of throws you in to the deep end, and you're going to learn all of your basic anatomy, your histology, your physiology, your pathology. You're going to learn them all at the same time, and you're going to do them in disease modules. That can be good for some learners, but it puts a lot of emphasis for the individual learner to master the basics on their own, and that can be incredibly challenging. We take a discipline-based approach to our curriculum, and so that means you get a deep dive in each course on the absolute essentials of that information in a medical context. So, for example, I teach in genetics, epidemiology, and immunology. And what that allows me to do is I spend 14 weeks going on a very deep, very nuanced dive into these courses and into these topics. And that gives us the ability of really hitting all these high yield points for the exam. But it also gives us the opportunity, because we cross teach, to do what we call horizontal integration. So while I'm teaching in genetics, the biochemistry professor is teaching the same topic from the biochemistry perspective. And the physiology professor is teaching the same topic from the physiology perspective. What that means is students are seeing everything, not just from that detailed perspective, but broad, to see all of the context that exists for these pieces of information. It's something that you can only do in a really well-designed, discipline-based course. And I think probably, Donna, this would be a great opportunity to talk about how the learning supports and the integration of the curriculum is really set up for that student success.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to talk a little bit about that. So, as was mentioned before, we have a really strong support system and excellent support faculty at this university. So, starting with the learning specialist team, incredibly skilled, lots of experience in the Caribbean medical school context, which is known for its rigor. And we can help you with a range of things. Most times, when you're coming into medical school, you're still figuring out how you learn, you're figuring out how to navigate this volume and pace because it really is unlike any other program you will have ever studied. So we can help with things like time management, test anxiety, selecting the main idea. How do you know what a lecture is about? How do you process this information? And what we call the study cycle, which is essentially how do you prepare for a class? How do you make the most of class while your excellent professors are talking and working with you? And then what do you do after class, right? So we help with all of those in one-on-one appointments. We help in workshops. There was a lot of talk about ARP. And so one of the major advantages of ARP is specifically the fact that it's a safe space to, one, get the foundation that you need to do well in basic sciences. And I'll be a little bit biased about this and say it's also an excellent space to develop the learning skills that you need to succeed in basic sciences, to succeed in the steps when your time is really short and you're working with a range of different time constraints, and also to succeed in the career that you're choosing, because lifelong learning is an essential part of becoming a doctor. We know that the body of medical education, medical knowledge really doubles every 2 to 3 months. So even when you're practicing, you need to be able to stay on top of that. So we're able to give you those skills in ARP in our dedicated study skills class. And so we help you to take an inventory that kind of builds your profile as a learner, and we walk through all of those 10 domains. So you leave really strong as a learner and with an understanding of what your gaps are and how you can address them before you even jump into the medical school curriculum. So that's one of the key advantages, I would say, with doing ARP and the specific support that we offer there. But we also offer support like workshops and appointments throughout EBS and Med. The other thing that we can help with is that we run and oversee the mentor program. So Craig mentioned kind of how student support and the peer networks, and the mentor program is a program that's incredibly collaborative and community-based, and it's where upper term students who have completed the term that you're in actually work with you and help you, whether it's with adjusting with St. Kitts, adjusting to a number of things, or how to study. So we kind of map students based on their preferences. And it creates a really nice environment where students are not just competing, which may have been the case at other institutions, but they're really collaborating and kind of building a community, sharing resources where everyone can succeed. And on top of that, outside of the support I oversee, we also have the campus counselors, which are trained psychologists who can help you with the adjustment to medical school, being away from home. If it's your first time moving, we know that there's a lot of adjustment there, and anything else that may pop up since life goes on even while you're in medical school. So there's a range of support that happens and that takes place. And we're always excited to kind of to work with students and guide them, because we know learning is learner specific, right? So the way you approach a particular topic might be a little bit different from the way someone else approaches it. And I know that a lot of our students are repeat appointments. They come back for further help. They come back to change things as the semester changes, and they really recognize that the way you approach one subject is not the exact same way you would approach another subject. So we can help you with those really specific changes and those really specific tweaks. And on top of that, just generally in terms of support, I know this was already mentioned, but the faculty advisors who are your actual teaching faculty are excellent and are really invested in your success. So imagine that you are struggling in a class, but you can actually just go talk to your faculty advisor who may be involved in teaching that class, and you can get really specific advice, right? So that's another incredible support facility that we have, just to sum up some of what is available. And then I think I'll turn back now to Sean.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. And I mean everything that you just described, combined with the breakdown of the curriculum that Craig was talking about, all of these are contributing factors. Certainly the connection between faculty and students because of the smaller class size, the smaller environment that we have, the individualized attention. All of these are contributing factors and lead to what is a 96% retention rate for UMHS, which is unheard of, certainly in international medical schools. And what one of the knocks on international medical schools, and one of the things that's sort of out there, and as you do your research, and you'll hear, oh, 50% of students, at these Caribbean medical schools aren't making it. That's absolutely not true, at least at UMHS. And it's because of all of the efforts that were described by Dr. Walker, and the structure that was described by Dr. Ayer. So the 96% retention is certainly unheard of. So there's a few things that I'm watching the Q&A, I'm watching the questions come in, so please keep them coming. Thank you. I know you're not seeing them all, but we're getting them answered. So there were a few questions, and I sort of want to turn back around then to, well, I guess really Dr. Aaron, maybe the students as well. Um, there was a question about faculty members, and we were talking about the interaction between faculty, and there was a concern that potentially there would be some issues with being able to connect with the faculty members for various different reasons, potentially because of potentially fluency issues, potentially maybe larger class sizes. Again, class sizes aren't an issue. But one of the things that's interesting about UMHS is that before faculty members are hired, the students have a say. Dr. Aaron, maybe you could talk about how that process works.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be happy to relive my grilling from when I interviewed for UMHS. So, before anybody is hired for the school, particularly in a teaching role, the first thing that happens is that the applicant has to be screened by all of our deans. And all of our deans are active lecturers. So this is not an anonymous board of administrators that sits somewhere. So I'm on that committee. The biochemistry professor is the head of that process. So we all weigh in to anybody who's coming in, and we do this from the perspective of a faculty member, of a professor, rather than from an administrator. So if we think somebody has the teaching skill and the experience that we need to come down to the university, um, we'll ask them usually to submit an example of their lecture materials or a recording of themselves teaching, and we'll make a final decision on that. Once we've got that done, we invite them to come down. So that's just the bar of entry. We invite them to come down to the university where they have to teach in at least the course that we're thinking that they want to be teaching in. So let's say if it's a neuroscience job, they have to come in and they have to absolutely teach a class in neuroscience. But if they might also be teaching in another class, we'll ask them to teach in a second class as well and make sure that they're able to handle the different disciplines that they might be interested in. So my own experience, I came down and I taught first in the cell biology class, which was a 3 hour lecture. So that's an absolute marathon of a day. You've got to be ready to go. You're standing in front of, 80 students who are looking at you, and they expect you to have the goods. And if you don't have it, there's no way that you're going to be able to fool that many people for that long. So after that class, the students give an evaluation form about how they feel that professor did for that class. They'll talk about the PowerPoint, they'll talk about the ability to be understood, they'll talk about the examples that were used. They'll go through everything. Very detailed questionnaire. And then I wasn't done. I met with the faculty committee who decided, if I was collegial enough, if I was a team player, if I could work with our curriculum. And then I was put right back into the classroom again, and I had to do the exact same thing for the immunology class. And they got a vote for me as well. At the end of all of that, you have to meet with the hiring committee who's going to grill you on your use of technology, on the question banks that you use, how you write questions, what familiarity you have with the USMLE. It's a very intense process over a couple of days. Once we have all of this data, um, we make a recommendation from the faculty side. The students make a recommendation from the student side, and it all goes to the president of the university, Warren Ross, and he gets the final say. And I can tell you this with no shame and no pretext whatsoever, the student vote carries more weight than the faculty vote. And I think it has to be that way because the students are the ones who expect us to be able to guide them in a process. And our duty is to those students. So if they feel that this is not the right fit, they are absolutely the front line of who is going to experience that. So I can guarantee you right now that student vote is the one that carries the weight.
Yeah, I think that's great. Um, sticking with sort of being in St. Kitts and what it's like being there. Um, so I'm trying to bounce between a few different things I want to call out. We're getting some great questions in here. So I was going to go in one direction, but now I think I'm just pivoting with the question that just came in. So instead of writing an answer to this one, I think I'm going to call it out. Two of you have lived in St. Kitts previously, and you're back in the US. Two of you are currently living there now because you're working there. So we've got a question right now that's up that is about living on the island and do you have the freedom to roam or do you stay in specific areas? How safe is it? Is it open? Is it an open campus? So we can approach that from a number of different areas. We're fortunate to have a couple of females here to talk about things from safety from a female point of view. I think that's important. I will say, just to sort of set it all up, that unlike some of the other campuses internationally that you may be considering, there is not a giant wall around the campus where everything is self-contained. There are other campuses where you basically fly into the island, you get off the plane, you go straight to the campus, you go through that gate, and you're behind that gate for your whole experience for the couple of years that you're there, and then you fly home. That's not the case in St. Kitts. I've been going to St. Kitts for nearly 20 years, having, working down there, and it's a wonderful place to be. It's become much more of a tourist destination during the period of time that I've been working in this area. And but I've never personally lived there myself. It's just a beautiful place for me to visit. I'm glad I get to work there. Um, those of you who've lived there, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experience living there and just sort of what the housing situation is like and how that all works and just really living there and being part of the community. So I don't know, Holly or Allison, maybe you want to kick that one off.
Sure, I can start. Um, so the island is beautiful, and I think we all know that from the pictures. There's, I don't want you guys to be overwhelmed about living and where to live yet, because once you do get accepted, there is a Facebook group for not patients, sorry, for prospective students that get accepted. So you'll be able to talk to future students or talk to alumni about where's the best place to live.
WhatsApp these days. These days it's mostly WhatsApp.
Oh, WhatsApp. Am I
So,
not cool anymore, Sean?
well, you and I,
Could be Instagram,
you said what your
TikTok, who
age.
knows?
You
I
said
don't
what
know.
your.
I
You
still
said
see
your age.
people. I still see people on Facebook. Oh my God, don't age me, Sean.
At least you didn't say
Anyway, you will
ICQ. You were all right. You did good.
That's good.
you will have some social media platform that will connect you with students. I lived in kind of the Frigate Bay area, which is more downtown. There's restaurants, coffee shops. The Marriott Hotel is a big hotel, so I know after exams we would go there, be by the pool, eat at the restaurant. There is a lot of housing closer to campus. It just depends on your financial situation and what your preference is. Do you want to be right near campus, which tends to be a little less expensive, maybe walkable, versus in the downtown area? I know for me, I did buy a really old island car because I like the freedom to go to the grocery store or to drive to campus whenever I want. But that gave me the luxury to travel around the whole island and see different beach clubs cabs and go to different places. So yes, you can get around the island and travel. If you don't have a car, the school provides transportation. There's taxis there. This is Marshall's. This is a restaurant too close to my house because I went there very frequently. Um, I I adapted well because it was just beautiful and the food was great. They didn't have Starbucks, but they had Rituals coffee, but I could still get my lattes in the morning. So it was a very uh, easy adjustment. This is downtown on campus. They do have kitchens who are the lunch ladies and provide homemade food. There's also Domino's Pizza that they'll bring in. These food trucks are newer from them when I went to school there, but you can see the bottom right's Rituals Coffee, so you can get your latte or your espresso. The bottom left picture is on campus. There is a bookstore. So if you needed and snacks and drinks, but if you needed any supplies, don't worry, you can get it down there. Don't worry that you have to have it shipped to the United States. So I don't know if Allison has anything else to add about that.
Yes. One of the things that I can say is my initial excitement and joy of joining this program actually happened at the airport. So, as mentioned before, you meet a lot of students when you are at the airport. I flew through Miami. So I met students, I met professors. I knew they were students because they had the same wide-eyed, confused look that I had. But we were lifelong friends from that moment. Literally, those ladies that I met there, we communicate all the time. One of them is literally my best friend. I was able to be there for the birth of her son. And so you start to form those small groups, and a lot of times students will choose to live together for sake of safety and just security for being in a place that you're not familiar with. But when you get to the airport in St. Kitts, there is actually a welcoming committee that meets you there. You have a representative from the housing department. There was another student there, so you can have a peer. And you also get to meet the lovely people that drive the shuttles for the school that can also be chartered as taxis. And as far as safety, I definitely always felt safe. I was one of the students that would take the first bus to campus in the morning and often the last bus at home at night. And during my time on island, I think that last bus maybe left campus about 10 or 11 p.m. And so riding the campus shuttle, because I did not have a car of my own, allowed me to meet other students that lived in my area. So I lived in an area called St. Peter's or Shadwell. And it was a 3-story building. I was up on the top floor, but the housing department does a very good job of vetting your spaces, vetting your landlords. So you could always reach out to housing department and say, these are my parameters. You do have access to a website, but I often just called them or sent an email and said, I am looking to stay within this price point. I would like to be this distance from the school. Could you please provide suggestions on where I could start? And they were very, very willing to do so. And I found the perfect place for me. I could see the port down at Port Zante, so I watched the cruise ships come in. I could also see the landing strip for the airport from my front porch. So I had wonderful views. I would watch the storms come in over the rain, or watch the storms, come in over the water. And then I would just open my windows and enjoy the island vibes. And I think that is one of the great things about choosing your place to live in St. Kitts. You want to make sure it's an area that you feel safe, that you have the accommodations that you need, and housing is there to do that for you and to support you. And
Thank
also,
you.
oh, I'm sorry, can I
Well,
add one
go
more
ahead.
thing?
Sure can. Absolutely.
About the grocery shopping. So the school also sponsors shopping trips for students. They did when I was there. And you definitely can find all of the things that you need, wonderful foods that are readily available in the States, you can get on island. If there's a certain brand of an item that you're looking for, if you don't find that particular brand, you often can find something very similar to it that, would be easy for you to grab on your shopping trips. But a lot of times I would go to campus on Saturday mornings to study, and then there's a grocery store directly down the street. So we would just walk as a group of students down to the grocery store on our study break, do our shopping, come back and pop our items in the fridge, like in the student lounge, and then we would take the shuttles home. So definitely shopping is not inconvenient. There are ways to get it done. And like I said, the school does sponsor shopping trips for students. So they collect a large number of you, take you to the stores, and then make sure you make it back to your home safely. And the bus drivers are wonderful. When I would take the late buses home, because I was traveling as a single female quite often, they would actually wait for me to get into my gate, up to my door, and inside of my door and flick my lights before they drove off. I never expected that. And that was one of the things that really warmed my heart about not only the petitions, but the staff that we had at our school and the way that the people that UMHS has in place to support us really cared about our safety. And that to this day warms my heart. And that's one of my favorite stories to share.
Excellent. Thank you, Allison. Sean, can you go back to the housing slide for just a second? I just want to tie everything up. Thank you. I mean, I was joking with Holly, but you will be put in contact with all of the other incoming students for your term, so you will be able to connect with people. Some people are looking for a roommate, some people aren't. Some people just want to get to know everyone else that's coming in the same semester that they are. But Allison mentioned the housing database, and that's really important. You can utilize the database and just book your housing through there. You can do what Allison suggested and just work with the folks who work for our housing department who will provide examples for you, example properties based on your particular parameters and your needs. That's important, regardless of where you live. Sean, can you go back to the map for a second too? I just want to touch on that again. Regardless of where you're living, there are pros and cons to each. Holly and Allison each touched on this. Sort of on the left side there, it looks like St. Kitts looks like a giant chicken leg, essentially. So on the left side there is where the campus is, and that's on the Caribbean side. And then Holly mentioned Frigate Bay, where she lived, and that's that cluster of homes toward the right, actually on the Atlantic side, very touristy area. A lot of expats from the U.S. and Canada and Europe are in that area. So very cosmopolitan area. So there are different reasons that you might pick different places, as was mentioned, and all of that will be sort of laid out for you by the staff in the housing department. But regardless of where you are, there is a minimum standard of accommodation. And we don't just put random, properties in here. You have to be vetted, and I think Allison or Holly mentioned that. So all of the properties that are here are vetted. These are landlords that we work with semester after semester, year after year. What's in it for the landlord is they get a consistent, income from people paying rent. And what's in it for us is the ability to know exactly the type of place our students are living. So we don't just let anybody, rent with us. So go ahead, Craig, you want to add something?
Yeah, so just sort of as the perspective, so one of the various hats that I wear is assistant dean of students, and that's directly involved not just with on-campus concerns. So, the dean's office for us, we serve as the integration between students and faculty. But the other thing that we're involved in is student safety, the experiences that they have on island. And so our office is very involved on a day-to-day basis for making sure that the life that people are living on the island is one that they're comfortable with, is meeting their needs, is conducive to their studying. So that's something that we take an absolutely active role in making sure. Um, we maintain a contact system, so we know where our students live. We have contact information for our students so that, for example, if there was a storm coming through the Caribbean, we push out information a week in advance. We give updates, making sure, people have the essentials. When it comes to organizing flights, when it comes time to, if there were family situations where you've got to leave the island, we have a system in place where we can help you manage with all of those eventualities. The dean's office is involved with your transition off of the island. We'll serve as liaison to health clinics that exist on the island. So there are a combination of private clinics and the public hospital system that are here. We have a campus nurse that sort of falls under the dean's office that we can work with that way. So in terms of the support system that exists from the school, it goes well beyond what you might just consider as academic supports. We also serve very much as a social support system as well. We have moderated things as, you might think this is not the role of a school, but we've moderated, difficulties between roommates where maybe somebody needs some space and they want to change their living situation. That's no problem. We have done that. We have helped people bring pets onto the island. We have helped people transport pets that they've adopted off of the island as they go home. So you name it, we have a system or a person in place who can help you with it. Even including like picking up packages from customs and bringing them to school, clearing them for you. We've got something for everybody. It's like Burger King. You can have it your way.
I like that. That's pretty good. I think we've covered a lot of the basic science program, and earlier on in their introductions, both Holly and Allison also talked about the second half of the program, and they each mentioned Portland as well. So, and if you recall, the way the curriculum broke down, we have the basic science program. So you spend 16 or 20 months in St. Kitts, so less than 2 years. Commonly, the basic sciences are known as the first 2 years of medical school. At UMHS, it's only 16 or 20 months, depending on the curricular track that you are in. The standard program is 4 semesters, and the extended basic science program is 5 semesters. As you heard, same coursework spread out over 5 semesters in EBS, 16 or 20 months. And then from there, you progress to the United States, and everyone moves into what's colloquially, can't say that word, what's commonly known as the 5th semester program in Portland, Maine. And it's a 1 semester program prior to moving on to your 3rd and 4th year clinical rotations, where you are, really going back through all of the information you learned in the basic sciences and getting ready for USMLE Step 1. But what you are also doing at that point is getting ready for clinicals, and you're out in the community, and you are working with clinicians. It is a very unique program. If you look around at other international medical schools, you're not going to see a type of a program like this where you're synthesizing all the information that you learned in the first half of your medical education and getting ready to put it into practice in the second half of your medical education. So maybe Allison, you've done it most recently. And let's just return to that for a little minute. I know you talked a little bit about it earlier, but can we just go back to that for a second, talk a little bit about Portland, what's going on in Portland, and how in Maine, and how it's getting you ready both for USMLE Step 1, which regardless of where you go to medical school, you have to take halfway through your medical education if you plan to practice in the US later. So getting you ready for both Step 1 and also for years 3 and 4 as well. Do you want to just talk a little bit about your experience in Maine?
Sure. So the reason that I referred to the main semester as the second ARP, or very similar to ARP, is because you will have didactic lectures, but what they do is target the high yield information from your basic sciences. And this is to re-solidify that information for you, to maybe give you a stronger foundation that you did not have from basic sciences, and begin to prepare you for the board exam that you will sit for, which is your Step 1 exam. So this is the board exam that all students will take, US and Caribbean, to prepare you to enter your clinical rotations. So as a part of the curriculum in Maine, outside of reviewing your didactic information, we also had access to a Kaplan course that's integrated into the curriculum. This is another way to review the material and have access to a Q bank or a question bank. And this is the most important way to assess the information, assess the knowledge that you have, and prepare for those board exams that we mentioned. Also, as a part of the curriculum, you have clinical skills labs, which are very important to prepare you for your clinical years. They teach you a wide range of clinical skills that you have to be able to do to pass your main semester. And then we had an OSCE, which is a standardized patient encounter from start to finish, from the moment that you are standing in the hallway Preparing to go into the patient's room, you are either the physician in the encounter or the scribe in the encounter. And you walk through the visit, introducing yourself to the patient, doing a full history and physical, which is the physical examination, and then presenting that information to your patient to help explain to them the diagnosis. You do the whole visit, and that's really important because that is the gist of what you will be doing in your clinical rotations. You have to know how to encounter a patient, to have a conversation, to pull all the pieces together, and then be able to communicate effectively, not only to your patient, but to your preceptor, because at that point you are a part of your patient's care team. And that's very important to be able to communicate your findings with your patient to be able to come up with a diagnosis and a treatment plan. So all of this is happening in your main semester, and it's very important to go through this process to prepare you for your clinical rotations. One of the questions that I get all the time is how do they really make sure you're prepared for your board exam, which is the step one. So I want to go back to that a little bit more. So I talked about the didactic lectures that you have, but you also can form peer study groups. So a lot of times students, if you're not studying on campus in Maine, there are a couple of libraries in the area. We would go to the library and have study sessions. If you study with note cards, that's fine. Bring your note cards with you. If you like to make up your own questions from the content, which is what I would do a lot of times, I would try to put myself in the mind space of a question writer. And that's very difficult to do, but I would look at the content and pull out the important bits of information and try to formulate a question around that to make sure that I actually understood the content. Another great way to do a review is to teach the material. And in your small group sessions in Maine, you have the opportunity to teach back or to teach the content to your peer group. One of the best options that we had was in one of our small groups, our preceptor had us act out a disease or a condition. And it seems really silly, but in all honesty, it made each of those scenarios that I acted out personally, I remember them word for word. I remember how the condition presents, what causes it, how you treat it, small little details that may be thrown into your questions or you may see in an actual patient that is really important for understanding pathophysiology, the why behind the disease. So all of those things come into play in Maine. And also in Maine, we have learning specialists that are there to teach you how to process the questions, how to approach board style questions and translate your information from the books, from your didactic lectures into your multiple choice questions. And that's also very important for studying for your boards.
Yeah, and and you mentioned it, all of the resources that are available to you, certainly through Kaplan, but also the UWorld Question Bank, the NBME self-assessments, and certainly leading up to the comprehensive basic science exam gets you ready for step one. Go ahead, Don. I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
So I just wanted to jump in to talk a little bit about the support that exists in Maine. It was already mentioned that there are learning specialists there that work with you while you're in Maine and post Maine. But I also wanted to jump in to say that some of the learning specialists that are based in St. Kitts also work with the Maine students. So sometimes you've already developed a relationship with us and you want to continue working with us, we'll also work with you. We also do workshops based on themes and trends and whatever students want in Maine. So we always stay very connected. And one of the more recent things in recent semesters that has been happening, and I'll probably call on Craig to give some more detail on this, is that we do question-based review sessions using UWorld questions. So all of the St. Kitts faculty are involved in leading question-based review sessions in Maine, including the learning specialists. So you are hearing from us on how to approach questions, how to dissect questions, how to integrate information with questions, how to assess your gaps, how to learn, all of that from questions, but you're also hearing from the basic sciences faculty that are in St. Kitts who have taught you all of these individualized courses, and you're in small group sessions with them where you do UWorld questions. And I think that's an incredible experience. And a lot of students appreciate and enjoy that because they can ask questions, they can kind of assess their gaps, and they also get to kind of stay in contact with the faculty that are in St. Kitts.
Yeah, so that's a really great point because, to the best of my knowledge, this is one of the things that we are doing that I don't believe exists anywhere else. This first, to have a dedicated review program is something special in and of itself. Many schools just give you the time to study for the exam, but don't actually do anything to support you while you're doing that. Whereas we have a structured review program. But in addition to that, it has evolved where, as Donna said, you're not just meeting with this new group of learning specialists that you don't really have a rapport with yet, even though they are absolutely fantastic. They're absolutely specialists in their area. You've spent 2 years with a group of faculty in some cases. And what we've learned is that students are receiving the benefits of it's basically education on learning how to learn, learning how to dissect questions, learning how to think in the mind of an examiner. That is something that a learning specialist can bring to you that maybe a content specialist can't. So, pairing up our learning specialist team along with our content specialist team has created a really, really strong review program. And what we're focusing on is not just going through and answering more questions with you. By the time you're in the main program, you've answered thousands of questions. You've seen scenario after scenario after scenario. Instead, it's been refocused where the idea is, what is this question stem actually testing you? Why did this get put on the exam? Why is the answer the way that it is? But more importantly, why are the wrong answers selected? Why are they the wrong answers that get chosen for this kind of question? And how do you make sure you don't fall into the traps that are set by an exam designer to see if you really know what you're talking about or if you just have this surface level learning? So, getting into the mind of an examiner using this combination of learning specialists and content specialists is incredibly powerful. And we are already seeing it pay off in the kinds of scores that our students are getting on standardized exams. We're seeing it in students who are getting ready for the STEP exam at a much faster rate than previous semesters. And we think it's impactful enough that we're rolling it backwards in time. So it now exists on the island where our top level semester students are doing the exact same review program as part of the Introduction to Clinical Medicine. And we want to roll it back further and further, all the way to the beginning semester, where we can start to say, you guys all know how to think like a student. To get into medical school, you know how to think like a student, but we need to train you how to think like a medical student. How do you assimilate? How do you integrate? How do you apply? And so we want to roll this all the way back to your first semester in medical school so you can start answering not just the exam questions from your courses, but start putting your courses together into this cohesive approach right from day one.
And that's going to get you ready, obviously, to take what will be at that point the most important exam that you take. Right now, those of you in the audience, most of you are looking ahead at taking the MCAT and you are very focused on, maybe even freaking out because you know that whatever your score is on the MCAT is going to in some way determine what your options are going to be for medical school. It's just that that's unfortunately, the way it is. Certainly in the US, we have a little more flexibility at UMHS, but there's always another exam to take. And so part of, what you're hearing from our panel here is how we are getting you ready to take this all important exam, USMLE Step 1. And so once you take that, after you complete the fifth semester and pass, you move on to your third and fourth year clinical rotation. So the third and fourth year, second half of the curriculum, that's the clinical sciences program. Those are your clinical rotations, clinical clerkships, is the term. So it's semesters 6 through 10 of the academic program. And we have 26 plus affiliate hospitals. They're located around the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. And so the way it's broken down, we can show the curriculum here. Regardless of where you go to to medical school, there are a series of what are known as core rotations. And it's 48 weeks at UMHS, and it's essentially your third year of medical school. And again, regardless of where you go to medical school, you will complete the same basic core rotations. And those are surgery, internal medicine, family medicine, pediatrics, OBGYN, and psychiatry. And that's going to give you a grounding in clinical work. And again, those are done at our within our affiliate teaching hospital network, which is around the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. And we'll go to that. So there's the slide. And then your fourth year, you move on to what are called elective rotations. Now, your elective rotations and what you do in your fourth year, it's interesting because you can stay within our clinical network, or you can move on really to, and Allison kind of talked about this a little bit, you can move on to any teaching hospital that accepts guests. And so there are thousands and thousands of hospital opportunities that are open to you in your fourth year. So what you're doing, again, your third year, these are the cores, everybody will do them. In your fourth year, you are beginning to define what your specialty is going to be. You're also beginning to define where you will be applying for residency. And you heard Allison say earlier that she tried a few hospitals out in different parts of the country than where she had previously lived. She wanted to try out living in those places. But what you also want to do, and I know Allison wanted to do this too, is you want to collect letterhead from different attending physicians. You want to collect letterhead from different hospital systems. You want to try out different hospital systems. Every hospital is going to have their own process. Every hospital is going to have their own software, their own system, how you electronically track patients. And so you want to learn as many different things as you can. It's going to make you a more well-rounded applicant when it comes time to apply for residency, which again, regardless of where you attend medical school, you are moving on to your postgraduate training or residency after you graduate and earn your MD. So the goal of every medical school is really the same thing. It's to get you ready for your first job after medical school, after earning your MD, which is that residency. And you want to get in, obviously, to the type of specialty that you want to get into. You want to get into a great hospital system, obviously, to set you up for success in the rest of your career. And incidentally, I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but you would take a look here. These are residency results for 2025. You can see the specialties that are there. And, you may say, why isn't this specialty there? Or why isn't that specialty there? And that's because there are some specialties you can't go straight into. There are some specialties where you have to go through internal medicine first, do 3 years of internal medicine, and then move on to a fellowship in a certain area. Gastroenterology, oncology, cardiology, a number of the ologies are like that. But you can go to our website. You can take a look at our match results for most of the past decade, and you will see the wonderful hospitals that our graduates are getting into, and you can see the competitive specialties, certainly that our graduates are getting into as well. So back to the hospitals, you can see that the hospitals are located, all in different areas of the country, also in Puerto Rico, also in Canada. So we have a number of different options for you, and you're going to have a say in where you are completing your rotations in third and certainly in the third year. We're going to ask you for your input. You will have the opportunity, to let us know where you'd like to be. For Holly, it was great. She was able to come back home, to Michigan, and again, she's working there today. One of the questions that came up in the Q&A area, and we've got some great ones that we've been answering. And I think both Holly and Allison, I think you both sort of touched on this. I sort of asked you about this in my opening, and you made quick mention of it, but let's go back to it because there's a question from someone in the audience. Are UMHS med students treated fairly during rotations in the US, and are the attending physicians and hospital faculty comfortable with UMHS med students? And so let me just I'll let either or both of you touch on that. But I'll sort of set it up to say, just so you can think about this and give you some context, these are hospitals that are connected to US medical schools. And so you have students from that actual medical school that are there. And so, we have to train students in the exact same way as those US medical schools to have them prepared, to do the same work in third and fourth year. And so I will just set that stage. So, you are there because you earned the right to be there. And so it's a good question, I think. And so I'll throw it, I guess, to Holly, to you, or to Allison. Are you treated fairly, as the question from the audience?
Sure. Yes, definitely. I am a Caribbean grad and I have medical students from Wayne State that are under me now. So who's to say the hospital you rotate you're attending didn't go to a Caribbean medical school? Honestly, no one's ever asked me where I went to medical school. I talk about UMHS a lot because I'm very proud of it. But once you're in residency, you're in fellowship, you're practicing, no one really cares or asks where you went to medical school. Um, so yes, you're treated fairly. I've never once had an experience where I was treated any differently. I think Allison touched on this. When you go to the Caribbean, you're working harder than most people who might have had a 4.0 GPA, got directly into medical school. Maybe they're just naturally gifted and smart. Usually, if you're going to the Caribbean, this is something you really, really want to do. So we show up early to rotations. We're involved in research. We leave late. And actually, I think we're more well liked.
I think it's what you just said is interesting, and just reminded me. I'll just tell a really quick story. I was doing an information session, and we had one of our alumni there, and a very similar question came from the audience. And because the alum who we had there was a residency program director himself at Georgetown in DC. And so anyway, so was asking the question. The question came from the audience. So now to this alumni, now that you are selecting residents for your program and you interview these people coming out of all these different schools, can you tell a difference as a residency program director when you get an application or when you interview a student from UMHS versus a student from a US med school? And or when they're in your program, do you see any difference while they're working for you? And he said yes. And my mouth sort of dropped open. I was like, you're not, no. You're supposed to say no. You don't, you're supposed to say no, there's no difference. And so he said, but let me explain what I mean. And then what he went on to explain was, and this goes exactly to the point that Allison made. When I look down the hall, when I walk down the hall and I see my residents, and I see there's a group of people standing outside of the elevator, I know those are my, grads from US schools. And then I see a bunch of people running up the stairs. Those are my Caribbean grads. And I thought that really sort of tied the point together in a really nice way. And everyone in the audience went, oh, they had a good reaction to it. So I probably butchered the story a little bit, but you get the gist of it. And I think that's really what's important, is that it's as if you're in the audience right now, you're looking ahead, obviously, at making an application to medical school. Maybe you've already made an application, but you're looking ahead at going through this process, and you're focused on what a pre-med student is focused on. And one of those things is, if I go to this other place, will I be treated differently? It's a very fair question. It's an important thing you have to consider. But Holly made a great point, because once you get into medical school, you have to do the exact same things that everyone else does in order to get out. And that's passing the exams, and that's showing up and completing the rotations properly. And that's doing all of that work. You're not just being handed a degree. This is not any sort of mill. Our accreditation, which we can talk about in a moment too, is it's they're the same standards as US accreditation. So our graduates are going out into the world successfully, and we have a 93% residency placement rate all time, because of the fact our students and our graduates are trained in the same manner as US and Canadian graduates. I see Craig's got his hand up, so you can add to that too.
Yeah, so there's something I want to point out just really quickly on this one. When we talk about medical schools that are in North America, and we think about the admission process that we're all familiar with to American or Canadian medical schools, the thing that we have to recognize is that when a school is getting 1,000 people apply and they're letting 100 people or less into the school, we just naturally assume that what they're doing is they're selecting the greatest academics, they're selecting the most qualified individuals, they're selecting the people who are the pinnacle for this program, and other people just didn't make the cut. I'm an academic, so I'm not an admission specialist. I'm an academic. I understand the academic world, and I'm going to tell you that that's not the case. That's not the way that it works. I'm going to tell you that what happens when you have 1,000 people who apply for a program and you accept 80 of them, what you've done is that you've selected 80 people who essentially all learn the exact same way because they all went through this interview process. It's usually called the multiple interview MMS system, or they've gone through some other panel interviews. They've submitted their standardized scores. All the scores are going to look the same. They've submitted their GPAs. All their GPAs are going to look the same. They're going to hit the same notes in their interview. And what you get is out of 1,000 people, you've selected 80 people who are good academically, but they all learn in the exact same way, more or less. And what that means is that you can design your curriculum with exactly one learner in mind. You can do things one way. You can have one kind of faculty member. You can have one kind of approach to medical education. And it makes everything homogeneous. Nationwide, it makes everything homogeneous. And so we think about all those other people who didn't get spots. And the natural assumption that people make is, oh, well, you just weren't up to the bar. That's absolutely not it. And in most cases, it's something as simple as you're a different kind of learner. And this program is designed for somebody else's learning style. So does that mean you can't be a doctor? Absolutely not. That's not at all the thing that we should be taking away from this. What it means is that program is not designed for you. And if you went in there, it's not the fit for you. It's not the thing that's going to support you the way that you think, the way that you learn. So you've got to flip the script. And when you're interviewing for medical schools, and when you think about all these things from the admissions of the medical schools on mainland, you think, you're not the right fit for me. This is not the place where I'm going to thrive. This is not the soil I'm supposed to be planted in, because it's not the deficiency of the learner. It's that the curriculum is designed the other way. So what do? If you're a school that really believes that people deserve a chance, and UMHS does, you put in all of these learning supports, you put in all of these flexible approaches, and you put in all of these student-centered approaches so that you can say, no matter how you learn, we will figure out the right way to support you. And that's essentially what Donna does as her role as the head of our learning support team. But it's basically the idea of you don't adapt to us, you don't fit to us. That's not the mission. We fit to you. And that is the opposite of what maybe you have been told from other places. So I don't want you to think about it as being you're getting a different kind of education, or that a school might, because it has a different admissions philosophy, it's not up to the same rigor. When you're in med school, you're in med school, and all the work is absolutely there. You're going to take the same exams, you're going to go into the same board specialties, you're going to be held to the exact same standard. But our philosophy is we will get you there based on who you are, not who we want you to be.
That's a great description of it too, Craig. You talked about some of those numbers, and just to put a fine point on that, when you have 1,000 people applying for 100 seats, what those medical schools are doing is they're essentially making decisions. You said it very eloquently, and it also comes down to numbers. And so they're picking and they're filtering people out if you don't meet a certain numerical standard. And maybe you had a 3.5 GPA in undergrad, and someone else who got in had a 4.0. Does that make your 3.5 any less worthy? Does it make you any less able? No, it certainly doesn't, as Craig mentioned. And why did you have a 3.5 and that other person have a 4.0? Well, you were probably off doing something else. Maybe you were working as a scribe or a medical assistant, or you were doing shadowing, or you were an EMT. You were doing something else to build your resume and learn how to talk to people, and develop those other skills and traits that are important. You just don't need to be able to learn, in a laboratory science course. You also need to learn how to interact with other people. And so those are, we find some amazing people who make great physicians simply because they were filtered out when they applied to other places. And so those are the students that you would end up with if you end up coming to UMHS are some amazing people, that we're able to, that end up coming here. So and Craig makes a good point. Everything else is there. And the reason is because, I mentioned the accreditation, and, you have to be accredited in your home country, and we have been since 2012, full accreditation, re-accredited in 2018 and 2023. But what allows our students to graduate and come into North America to practice medicine, and included in that is taking those U.S. Licensing exams, Canadian licensing exams. That's a full accreditation through the Accreditation Commission on Colleges of Medicine, or ACCM. And we got full accreditation in 2015, re-accredited in 2021 and 2024 as well. So, and the reason I mention that is because the Liaison Committee on Medical Education, the LCME, that's the body that accredits medical schools in North America. They do not accredit international medical schools. So there are a small number of international accrediting bodies. And if your medical school is not accredited by one of these very few accrediting bodies internationally, your students are not able to take step 1 and step 2. You're not able to come into the US for clinical rotations, and you are not able to get a residency and ultimately get a license to practice under your own name in the US. So, and we wouldn't have these accreditations if the program didn't meet the same standards as any US or Canadian medical school, because ACCM follows the exact same standards as the LCME, and we have to demonstrate that on a regular basis when they come back and do a site visit for us. So you can read a little bit more about that, on the website. So that's a number of different things that we've covered. Probably at this point, the main questions those of you who are in our audience have are around admissions, and we've started to touch on admissions. So we'll go into a little bit of that now. Sham, let's skip ahead to the admissions process. Once you're ready to apply to the university, and hopefully after hearing some of this information tonight, you'll say, yeah, this is a place where I'd like to learn more. You'll continue to do your research, and once you're ready to apply, we make it fairly easy. The application is right there on our website at umhs.org. If you've previously applied to through AMCAS or ACOMAS, or up in Ontario, the Ontario process, the OMSAS, or the Texas Medical Dental. If you have any of those application PDFs, you can submit it directly to us, and it will serve as your UMHS application, because we're asking all of the same questions. In order to be considered, you need to have completed a minimum of 90 undergraduate credits, or the equivalent of 3 undergraduate years. You need to have completed a standard slate of pre-med prerequisites, and it's pretty typical. It's a year of biology with lab, a year of chemistry with lab, or a year of organic chemistry with lab. You need physics, you need math, you need English. So it's the standard, slate of prerequisites. And if you're in any, pre-med program at your undergraduate institution, you will surely have taken, those courses. So we'll review those once you apply. The MCAT is likely to be required of you for those of you who are citizens or residents of the U.S., or if you have completed your undergraduate education in the U.S., or if you've done a postbac in the U.S. or a master's degree in the U.S. before you apply to medical school, the MCAT will be required. If you live anywhere else in the world and have never done any training in the US, the MCAT is not specifically required, but it's always recommended. You will submit a resume or a CV to us so we can learn a little bit more about you. You will submit letters of recommendation, and those could come in one of 2 forms. They will either be a couple of individual letters of recommendation from faculty who have taught you, preferably in the sciences, but not absolutely required. Or if you've gone through the committee process at your undergrad institution and you have a committee letter which takes into account opinions about you from multiple people, faculty members, clinicians, people you worked for, supervisors, the committee letter will be the only thing you need to submit as far as your recommendations. There's an essay that's part of it. Once everything comes in, our staff and our administrative headquarters get right to work, and we can usually, get back in touch with you within a day or so and let you know exactly where you stand. If there is additional information that you still need to submit, the portal is nice, and you can upload documents electronically. It's nice and easy. You can have them submitted through Parchment, and so there's It's very easy to get the application into us. There's no barrier there. And so we'll let you know what you still need to submit, or if it's complete, we do a preliminary review of your application and we determine if you are going to be eligible for an interview at that point, at which point you will be contacted and we'll let you know who that person is and you'll get the interview scheduled. Interviews are happening one-on-one, but not necessarily in person. These days, most interviews are conducted like this and via Zoom. But you can meet in person. We have a staff, and the admission staff is spread around the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. So we may have somebody in your area, and if you prefer to meet one-on-one, we could certainly arrange that. But again, most are happening remotely. The biggest thing about the application process at UMHS that will be different than, the process that you go through in the US and Canada is if you think about the process in the US and Canada, there's one intake per year, right? Medical school starts in the late summer, early fall in, every US or Canadian medical school. And there's a very linear, process that leads up to it. It's really about, 13 or 14 months. The portal to apply opens in the late spring over a year before you will actually enroll. And so you apply, and through the course of the summer, maybe there are secondary applications that you will complete. And then in the course of the fall, you will start to learn about whether or not you're going to be invited to interview at the schools that you've applied to. And interviews happen through the fall and into the winter. And then early decisions come out in December, and then there's the standard regular decision date in the early part of the spring, and maybe you get put on a wait list, and so then it can drag on into the summer. And all in all, between when you submit your first application to the point where, if you're accepted to a medical school in the US or Canada, where you actually enroll, again, it's about a 14-month process. And it's this long, drawn out process. There's a lot of waiting, a lot of patience that's required. And it's because of what we described earlier, well over 50,000 people applying for 23,000 seats in US medical schools, 18 to 20,000 people applying in Canada for a fraction of that in terms of seats. The medical schools are filtering down, determining who they're going to interview. And once they decide who they're going to interview, then, obviously they're determining who they're going to admit. And it's a long drawn out process. All of that to say that the process at UMHS is completely the opposite. First of all, we have 3 intakes per year. As I mentioned, we do have the standard, the traditional, September start date. And if that's the right time for you to begin medical school, you can certainly start in September with us. But for students who are, quote unquote, off cycle for whatever reason, or, just at a different point in their life, if you're a career changer, whatever it may be, we also offer the opportunity to begin in January or May. Winter term is January, spring term is May, and fall term is September. So you've got 3 different terms you can apply for. Therefore, we have no deadline because there are always 3 terms that are coming up that you can apply to. So everything is rolling at UMHS. So here it is, it's a Tuesday night. Maybe you like what you've heard, and over the course of the next couple of days, you gather your materials together and you submit an application. You would know by the end of the week, if there are additional items that we'll need, if there are additional what documents we have, what we might still need, if you'll be invited to interview, once everything's complete. So everything happens fairly quickly. And again, it's because we operate on a rolling basis. So the sooner you apply, the sooner you will hear back from us about where you stand. Once we have all the materials that we need in order to conduct a preliminary evaluation, then we will determine if you will be interviewed. And then the sooner you interview, the sooner your file will go forward to the members of the admissions committee, which are made up entirely of faculty. And the admissions committee makes decisions weekly. And so we're not waiting until a point next March where we send out all of our decisions. We actually receive decisions back from the faculty admissions committee each week, and we immediately transmit those out to the student. So, literally, if you're sitting out there tonight and, you've got all of your coursework done and it didn't happen for you for whatever reason to get into med school, a month ago, and you're thinking about what your next, move is going to be, but you're ready to go, you could apply to us over the span of the next, day or two. You could have your interview some point during the course of the next week, and maybe a week after that, have a decision. And so it can, it really just sort of brings forward how simple the process really can be It doesn't make our scrutiny of you as an applicant any less, though. And Dr. Eric can attest to this certainly as a faculty member. The faculty committee, there are a number of faculty. I'm the vice president for admissions at UMHS. I don't make any admissions decisions. That's important for you to understand. The faculty committee gets your file, they comb through. There's a whole full academic evaluation that's been prepared on you. There is a full summary of your conversation with your interviewer. There is, there are some takeaways from your academic history. You look at the trends, what were the challenges that you faced? Did you start strong and finish not so well? Did you start not so well and finish strong? So who are you as a student at this point in your life? Are you someone who will be a fit in our program? What types of things have you done? Have you volunteered? Have you done other things? Have you shadowed? Have you scribed? Have you worked as an EMT? What have you done to get exposure to the career? It could be any one of those things. So all of those things are considered by the members of our faculty committee, and they will come back to us with one of a handful of decisions. Now, you heard about the accelerated review program in great detail. Allison has gone through it previously. You heard about it from Dr. Walker's perspective as well. The accelerated review program and an invitation to start in the accelerated review program before getting into the full MD program is a decision of the admissions committee. And so it is one of those options that they have. And the other options obviously are acceptance or denial. That goes without saying, probably. And the acceptance, the admissions committee will decide which curricular track you will be invited to, either the 4-semester med program or the 5-semester EBS program. If you're invited to the 4-semester program and you would prefer to do the 5-semester program, you can do that. If you're invited to the 5-semester program, you cannot say, I want to do the med program. That is your placement. So those are the decisions that come back to us from the members of the admissions committee, and we transmit those immediately upon receiving them. So that's important, and we understand how momentous of an occasion this is going to be for you. It's something you've been working toward maybe your entire life. You may have been one of those people who at 5 years old, you were a doctor for Halloween. And, ever since then, you've said, yeah, that's what I want to do with my life. And you've stuck with it. And maybe you've been told no by a place or two. And, and that wasn't the right fit for you. And maybe we are. So when we communicate that decision, we make the phone call, we let you know, congratulations. The admissions committee is offering you admission to UMHS. And we understand how big of a moment that is for you. You're crying on the phone, probably. We're crying on the phone with you. It's exciting. It's important. It's one of the biggest moments, to this point in your life, and they only get bigger from here. And so it's really exciting, and it's something that we certainly appreciate. And then from there, obviously, once you're accepted, it comes, the next, part of the process is determining, well, how am I going to pay for this? Obviously, that's a reality. The good news about UMHS is our tuition is very, very competitive compared to your other options, certainly among international options. You can see on the screen here where we stand in the 180,000 range for the entire curriculum. That's the entire 10-semester curriculum. You can see how it compares to typical costs for 4 years of medical education at in-state and out-of-state public institutions, private institutions, and you can see that international medical schools are significantly more expensive. So, and yet you want to start to ask why. Why is it so expensive? Why are these schools so expensive? And frankly, many of them are owned by corporations. And in a corporation, any of you who have studied business would know that the corporation's first allegiance is to the shareholders and making money for the shareholders. And that's a reality in this world. UMHS is a family-owned university, and of course, we're dependent on tuition to drive the university forward. And I can tell you, having worked here for as many years as I have, that the tuition that comes in goes right back into the university. It's not going into my pocket, that's for sure. So I think that's important for you to understand. And so, nevertheless, $184,000 over the course of 4 years is still quite a bit of money. So what are your options to pay for it? Well, at the time that you are reviewed for admission, you are also reviewed for scholarship opportunities, and you will be notified pretty much immediately after you're notified of admission if you are going to be receiving a scholarship. And there are a number of different scholarships that are available, and you can take a look at the website to see the breakdown of what those are. There's no separate application for those scholarships. And again, you will be notified at the same time you're notified of your acceptance. What most students who don't have a rich uncle are going to be doing is applying for loans. And private loans are available at UMHS, and it's through Sallie Mae, one of the largest lenders, in the U.S. Available for U.S. citizens and permanent residents, and they're available regardless of the program that you are in. So once you're accepted, the first contact that you will have is with our post-acceptance director, that's Nellie Alvarez. She will lay out the process for you of what you have ahead, the things that you need to do to prepare to enroll, and talk about those things about housing, about getting ready to travel down to St. Kitts, about what you need to know about moving there for the short period of time that you will be there. And she will make the warm handoff to the Office of Financial Aid, who will lay out for you all of your different options for financial aid. So you'll be working with them really right away. You'll hear from them as soon as you are accepted to the university. So let's see. I think that covers just about everything that we wanted to cover tonight. The one thing that we sort of want to bring it home and show you is, well, we just showed you what the tuition cost is, and we've been talking for almost 2 hours now about all of the different opportunities that are here. So what we really feel we are providing, and what President Warren Ross, and we really haven't even talked about him and his legacy and history, and what he is personally providing as the president of UMHS. We haven't really talked about this. Everything that we're doing really starts at the top. President Ross has nearly 50 years now in medical education. His name is on one of the prominent universities in the Caribbean, which was established by him along with his father back in 1978. They've not been involved in that university for well over 20 years. But what's important is that through all of the experience that he's had since the late 70s, designing and developing campuses, he's brought everything to bear here at UMHS since our inception in 2008. And, to this point, we're very proud of the fact that we've graduated well over 1,600 folks who have gone on and into residency and practice in the U.S. And so it's been a very busy last 17 years at UMHS. There's been great growth, but we've maintained who we are, and that's a smaller institution focused on personalized attention, and that's really important. And the value that you will receive as a student at UMHS is tremendous. You saw the tuition, you saw it in comparison to other options that you're going to have both inside North America and outside North America, and what you're receiving is really astounding. Since our inception, we have a 93% overall residency placement rate, which is fascinating, which is fantastic and tremendous. 96% student retention, that's first to second year. And it has to do with all of the things that you heard about through the course of the presentation this evening. Smaller class sizes, individual attention, great support from learning specialists, certainly a dedicated faculty who will actually know who you are, people who aren't in a publish or perish situation like they are at most US and Canadian medical schools. They come to UMHS, and if you didn't catch this in Dr. Ayer's comment earlier, they come to UMHS because they love to teach. They've gone through that publish or perish situation, and they've come out the other end knowing that they want to make future doctors. And that benefits you as a student because they actually get to know who you are. The 7-to-1 faculty to student ratio makes a huge difference. We've got a state-of-the-art campus in St. Kitts, and then you focus on the fact that it's quote unquote an international medical school, but then you realize that you're only there for 16 or 20 months, and it goes by so fast. And then before you know it, you're back in the US for that wonderful bridge program up in Portland, Maine, getting you ready for the first step in the licensing exam process, and also getting you ready for years 3 and 4, your clinical rotations and clerkships that are happening in more than 26 hospital affiliates around the US, Canada, and Puerto Rico. We've got great, affiliations with Kaplan, with UWorld, with NBME, and it leads to tremendous pass rates on the licensing exams. And again, those great, opportunities for students as they graduate and move on to residency all over North America. So, again, if you like what you're hearing, And if you have not yet been given an opportunity to start medical school, perhaps we can open the door of opportunity, for you. Again, we're still accepting applications for all of the entry terms in 2026. We make it easy to apply online at umhs.org. So, um, I guess we'll begin to wrap up here. We're coming up on 2 hours here, this evening. We always say that we're going to keep it concise, and I feel like we have. But I also feel like we've given you a lot of information as well. So, as we begin to wrap up, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to weigh in on this particular question from your own perspective. And well, let's start with Dr. Ayer, our Assistant Dean of Student Affairs. So, in admissions, Dr. Ayer, we're as you know, having helped us out on a number of occasions, we're often asked something to the effect of, why should I attend UMHS? I've also been accepted to, XYZ university, maybe on another island, maybe another, school that's been, getting folks ready to practice in the US or Canada. So why should you attend UMHS when you may have been accepted, somewhere else? What would you say to someone who asks you that?
So that's a great question. And, brevity is not exactly my strong suit, but I'll go for it. I'll make an attempt on it on this one. I could give facts and figures. I could go for, this detail or that detail. But at the end of the day, there are two things that matter the most to me in terms of the student experience. So the first one is, in my opinion, and I know in President Ross's opinion, admissions is a promise on our part that we believe in you, that we want to extend that open door opportunity to you that maybe has been closed for you before. And we're taking that step with you, that if we're going to open the door, we believe in you. We want to see you to that finish line. We want to see you walk across the stage at graduation. And that comes, I believe, from the fact that this university is still family owned, a family legacy of that kind of integrity. That doesn't exist in the corporate environment. And the corporate environment is usually about the bottom line of dollars. The bottom line of dollars in a lot of schools is made up by numbers. And what they're interested in is the number of individuals who are coming in through the door, but not the number of individuals who graduate. And you will very quickly see that intake and output are grossly mismatched. And somebody should be willing to look at you, somebody should be willing to look in your eyes and say, at the end of the day, 96% of our graduates continue to, or 96% of our students continue to move through the program. That's something that we can look at you and say with absolute honesty and integrity. We interviewed a faculty member from one of the other Caribbean schools relatively recently. And during the interview, I asked him how he manages to do student engagement in his class, because he mentioned that his class was about 200 students. So I asked him, how do you do active learning with 200 students? He said, oh, you don't. But we don't bother because by the second semester, there's only about 120 students. So the fact that he was willing to admit that to me in an interview says, you're not going to work, and that your school has a philosophy that we don't believe in. And to me, that is question number one. Do you believe I'll make it to the end of the program? If you come to UMHS, that is my belief. So I'll start with that. The second thing that I would tell you to say is everything has to pass the sniff test. You're about to invest your money, your energy, your time, your sleepless nights, your anxiety, your self-doubt, your family's belief in you. You're about to invest it all into your medical education. And it is going to ask more of you than you have ever given to anything. So you're about to commit. You better be with people who are going to commit with you to that same level. So if the people that are in your environment are not committing to the same degree that you are, those aren't your people. And my belief is that the faculty, the support services, The administration, the infrastructure at UMHS is designed around that same level commitment. We'll put our money where our mouth is, that if you can point out something that you're going to commit that we haven't also committed to, I'll put it out there on the recording. We'll find a way to make that happen. Because that's the philosophy of this school. But I challenge you to find something that we haven't already done that with. So find people who are going to commit to the same level that you're going to commit. And if anybody that you're talking to is not giving you both of those answers, that's not your place.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Ari. Appreciate it. Appreciate all your thoughts. Dr. Walker, how about you? How would you respond to differentiate UMHS from the myriad of options that students have these days?
I will say my answer is very similar to what Craig said, but I'll start with the idea that unlike at a large university or a large medical school, each of the faculty at this university, every single person in the administration, all of even the staff are very personally invested in your success. And that is something I hear from every single one of my students. I meet with students as part of my job, and students open up about this and say how incredibly supportive everyone is. I think that's a major factor to consider. I think the other factor to consider is the culture. Even as a faculty member, the culture is something I really appreciate. And I know that students really appreciate our culture because a lot goes into making it collaborative and community based. So we talked about things like these peer led sessions. We talked about the TA program. We talked about the faculty advisors, the campus counselors, all of that support, but also because the culture of the university is collaboration and community based. Outside of all of those structures, most students help each other. They support each other. They share resources. They share a listening ear. There's that genuine investment across the board in everyone's success, which I think is really hard to find. The final piece I will say is exactly that in terms of the quality of education. In a lot of the larger universities where class sizes can exceed 1,000, you are absolutely not getting the quality and individualized support that you can get at a smaller school, right? It just comes back down to common sense, the way that I can work with students one-on-one, have multiple appointments as needed, follow up with students to make sure things are going well is something that I wouldn't be able to do at a larger university. So you really get the advantage of feeling like you are part of a family when you join the school from the other students, from the other faculty. But I think it comes back to the whole idea of this school being a family-owned school and that being the priority as opposed to, the numbers and figures and the business model and all of that. So I would say that's probably several things, but the way I would answer that question.
Well, thanks so much, Dr. Walker, for your thoughts and on behalf of the audience for your time tonight as well. All right, Allison, now I'm going to ask you something a little bit different. You're making your way through medical school, and like any medical student, you've had a number of challenges that you faced and had to overcome, as any successful student would. So, what advice do you have for our audience? What do you know now that you wish you knew back when you were in their shoes as a pre-med?
That's a good question. I always laugh when I get that question because I immediately think about what you mentioned, all of the stress and the sleepless nights. And what I wish I knew then that I know now is you will make it. I know it seems like you won't. I know it seems like your stress level and anxieties will get the best of you. But all of the work and effort that you're putting in, all of the tireless studying, the crying, I get it. I was there. I am there.
You are there.
Yes, I am literally living that moment now, but you will make it. UMHS does an amazing job of supporting you through this process. One of the reasons that I actually applied to the school was because of a presentation very similar to what you just saw, but also because of the responsiveness of the staff to my questions. I would email Earl daily. I know I probably got on his nerves, but he would always respond to my questions with honesty. I asked to speak to a student. He sent 2 students my way, and they were very open and honest about their experience at UMHS, about the struggles of a student, a medical student, and what it was like for them. And I appreciated that. And that was the reason that I decided to move forward with my application and to put my eggs in the UMHS basket because I knew that I would have the support that I needed. Once I got into the program, I fell in love with the structure of the curriculum. I fell in love with the island. You keep hearing the word family, And it definitely feels like a family. My master's program was a smaller program, and I knew that I wanted that nice, tight-knit family feel, and that's definitely what I got at UMHS. The class sizes are small. There is ample opportunity for one-to-one interactions with your professors. If I had questions, I could ask them on a break in class, or I would literally walk with my professors back to their office after our class was over to go over content, or to just, ask for support on how to live the student life. You have to remember that our professors were once students. And so they know what it's like to struggle. They know what it's like to not grasp a concept and to need additional support. So they are there for you. And the school's campus is absolutely stunning. There is a massive grass area. And a lot of times, my friends and I, when we were struggling and stressed, we would literally walk out into that area and just scream. And no one bothered us. No one asked us what we were doing. They understood. They understood that sometimes you have to release that anxiety in order to move forward. So if I could tell myself a few years ago one thing, it would be to keep pushing. Keep moving forward. Don't give up on your dreams. Find a program that supports you the way that you need to be supported, and you will be just fine.
That's great, Allison. Thanks. Good luck, and we'll see you in next year's version of the picture that's up on the screen right now.
Look
So that's
forward
great.
to it.
Thank you. And lastly, Holly, same question. What wisdom can you impart to the members of our audience?
Yeah, I wanted to answer both questions actually, because I thought of a really
Ooh.
good point. How is UMHS different than other schools? What I've noticed, at least from a US medical school, the students are really competitive. They don't share notes, they don't help each other out. At UMHS, from day one, you're supported by the upperclassmen. Share notes, share, hey, this book worked for me. So I think that's really special. And I think that's very unique for a medical school. It's not cutthroat like you might see at other schools. And then things I wish I knew now that I knew then was you'll make it. It's hard, but just to make sure you enjoy the island and it's okay to take a break sometimes. And I wish you all the best of luck.
Thanks so much, Holly. Appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks for hanging in with us this evening. We really appreciate your time, and thanks certainly to my colleagues for their thoughts, and for what I know has been an informative discussion for all of you in the audience. So I encourage you to follow us on social media, whether it's Facebook, Holly and I were joking about, we are certainly there, Instagram, X, TikTok, YouTube. And by the way, on YouTube, we'll have this webinar posted sometime tomorrow. If you'd like to rewatch it, you can contact us anytime at admissions@umhs-sk.net. Visit us on the web at umhs.org. And for my colleague, Sham Daria, Director of Enrollment Management, once again, it's Sean Powers, I'm Vice President for Admissions at UMHS, thanking you for your time this evening, wishing you great luck, and looking forward to working with you as you prepare to become a medical student at UMHS. Thanks again for spending some time with us this evening. Have a great